An increasing number of prominent right-wing commentators, including one that used to work in the Trump White House, are now publicly panicking that bad faith Republicans may have overplayed their hand and will lose the election because of general incompetence and inability to govern, and even on the specific matter of the border and immigration. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, so here's the situation. As you may recall, there was a bipartisan Senate border bill that was being negotiated between Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats for the past several months. The primary Republican negotiator on it is James Lankford, a very conservative Republican, a guy who is very hawkish on the border and who was endorsed by Donald Trump during his most recent election precisely for that reason. And after months of negotiating in good faith, in which Democrats were, quite frankly, willing to give the farm away effectively to Republicans, Donald Trump feared that he would lose a wedge issue before the election and said, basically, kill it. We don't want to solve this existential crisis, as Republicans tried to spin it. We don't want to solve it before the election because we want to use it as a cudgel. So it never made it past the Senate. The House vowed to kill it anyway. And in response, President Biden said, listen, I'm going to make a big deal out of this. I'm going to make sure the American people know that you all are responsible for it. And the jury is still out as to whether or not this is going to happen. But prominent right-wing commentators like Brit Hume of Fox News is actually starting to panic about this. So I want to play several clips and unpack all this together.
I think the Republicans, in the meantime, however, are in danger of losing the advantage they have vis-a-vis Biden on the issue of the border and on the issue of Ukraine funding, Israel funding, funding to defend Taiwan, because they are refusing to act on these measures that would deal with that. Also on the issue of rebuilding America's defenses. So I think that that snapshot that those polling numbers you cited represent may be temporary and are likely to be temporary, in fact, and that the Republicans think of what the Republicans are doing, for example, Kevin, on the border issue. They said that they wouldn't pass aid to Ukraine and other places unless there was action on the border. So the Senate produced a bill negotiated by one of its most conservative Republican members on the border, which had some defects in it, as compromise measures always do. And it was nonetheless the strongest border protection bill that I've seen in my time in Washington. And the House simply announced it was not going to take it up, so it failed even in the Senate. Then comes this question of the measures for the funding of Ukraine and elsewhere, and that looks like it's going to go down in the House as well, even though it passed the Senate. So I think these are a couple of issues that put Republicans in peril of looking like literally a do-nothing Congress, which is something you can bet the Biden administration is going to be talking about going forward in the Biden campaign as well.
And they should. They absolutely should. Again, as we talk about, simply a fact, because of Mike Johnson, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, this is factually the second least effective and productive Congress in U.S. history, because Republicans, even with their razor-thin and ever-shrinking majority, refuse to work bipartisanly with House Democrats, with Senate Republicans, and the Democratic president. They genuinely believe, with their razor-thin majority in one chamber that is often unruly and chaotic, that they get to be the tail that wags the dog. It's absolutely absurd. And they're punished for bipartisanship. Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose star, unfortunately, is ever rising within the House Republican Conference, has repeatedly said that Republicans who work with Democrats should be primaried. They should suffer electoral consequences, which doesn't create much of an incentive to get things done. So Brit Hume is like, listen, there's ample fodder here for the Biden administration to really hammer this home. But it's not just Brit Hume, who is relatively reasonable as far as right-wing commentators are concerned. Eric Bolling on Newsmax, right, who is considerably less reasonable on a network that is considerably more partisan and deranged. Even he, in his estimation, is starting to get really frustrated with Republicans' performance.
Republicans lost the seat, and this also might be why GOP voters flipped in last night's election.
I talked to two voters today who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, turned around and voted for the Democrats in this race, voted for Tom Suozzi because they said his message on bipartisanship and the fact that House Republicans have really struggled to pass legislation over the last couple of weeks impacted the way they were looking at this race.
Republicans can't govern. The New York voters claim they have a point. Look at our southern border disaster and foreign aid funding completely off the charts recently. Americans are fed up with Republicans, not for political reasons, but because they cannot govern.
They can't govern. They absolutely can't. This is so funny because I love having these conversations and like the debates and back and forths I very often have with conservatives. It's simply a fact, regardless, even if you genuinely believe that in theory Republican policy is better, it's not. But you believe it, that's fine. The fact of the matter is Republicans suck at governing. Democrats are objectively better deal makers, administrators, negotiators, executors of policy, legislators. They're just better. Republicans cannot factually run a lemonade stand. They're just not. They suck at it. And why is that so surprising to people? The entire ethos of the Republican Party is government sucks. So they're incentivized to make sure government doesn't work because that's the entire platform. Government sucks. I mean, it's a wonderful racket they have. They say government sucks. They help contribute to government breaking or not being able to be fixed. Then they point to that and say, hey, I told you government sucks. Also, please reelect me. And then they get reelected and the cycle repeats. And Democrats, on the other hand, it's like constantly dealing with a bunch of cats knocking stuff off the counter. And as you're trying to clean up, the cat knocks something else. It's like it's an untenable situation. But the fact of the matter shows, and it's clearly reflected in the facts, Republicans can't govern. Even Eric Bolling is fed up with it. But it's not just Eric Bolling. Kellyanne Conway, right, who used to work for Donald Trump as one of his senior advisors. She is the master. She is a washing machine on spin. She spins so well. Even she had to give it up to Democrats, and much like Eric Bolling just did with regards to the 3rd Congressional District in New York, that special election that was held the other day, in a seat that was previously occupied by Republicans. Republicans previously occupied the seat. Democrats flipped it. So again, that's kind of the predicate for her comments as well. This is what she had to say.
Suozzi, instead of lying like every other Democrat seems to be doing these days, Mayorkas is doing a great job. There's no crisis at the border. The borders are, Kamala's wonderful. Biden's right. What did he do? He said, I better go against my party on the border. And he did it. Paid advertising, mailers, press conferences, public appeals. So he has shown the Democrats how to run on the border. I think the Republicans should do the same thing with abortion. Instead of being ostriches and pretending with their head in the sand, they should be peacocks and say, look, this is what it means to be pro-life in 2024. This is what it means to be pro-choice in 2024. And instead of hiding, own it and message it. I think he did a great job on that, going against his party. Let's see how many Democrats follow suit.
So what she's saying is that even on the specific issue of immigration and abortion, just like Brit Hume said, that Democrats do have a winning argument to make if they're able to make it skillfully, right? Tom Suozzi was able to win, at least in part. I would argue there are other reasons which people who voted for him valued democracy, for example, according to the polls. They valued bipartisanship, as well as what Eric Bolling said as well. So it wasn't just the matter of the southern border. But to Kellyanne Conway's point, there's a way to deliver a winning message for Democrats, or a more persuasive argument, at least, than Republicans on the border, if you get a sufficiently skilled interlocutor and rhetorician to make the case, or a candidate. So to me, the fact that you have back-to-back examples of prominent right-wing commentators who are starting to panic, even though right now the polling favors them, even now on immigration, right? As we talked about, whether we like it or not, immigration is the highest polling issue at this point in time with the American voter. And right now, Republicans still enjoy an advantage, but it is early. And if the Democrats can fire on all cylinders, if the media reports these things accurately, the American people will come to know that even if they think that this bipartisan deal was the best thing since sliced bread, even though, again, it was very conservative, relatively speaking, well, it's Republicans that killed it. Democrats should get all the credit and Republicans should get all the blame. And there's an opportunity here for that to be the case. Moreover, on the broader issue, Republicans cannot govern. And that, more than anything, is an evergreen issue for Democrats. They don't even have to campaign with respect to the border because, again, there is ample reason not to do it. Again, that was a very conservative bipartisan bill. So many progressives might not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's okay. because the broader issue is Republicans can't govern. It's simply a fact. And that this seems to me to matter quite a bit, that these right-wing commentators recognize it and fear it. Let me know what you think in the comments.